Welcome to House of B Entertainment. Today we're going to be talking about the TV show American Chopper and our top 5 picks for biker builds when we return. So welcome back. Again, we're going to be talking about the TV show American Chopper. We're going to be talking about the biker builds and our top 5 picks for those bike builds.
Fabricate!
Get in there and fabricate! Just a little history on the show, though. This is a show that ran for 10 seasons. It started off with 6 seasons under American Chopper, the series. It was a show that featured the family, the Tuttles from Orange County, New York, that had a steel shop, Paul Tuttle Sr., and he built bikes on the side. It was one of the earlier reality TV shows, one with some drama to it, but also one that had some really great manufacturing of beautiful, gorgeous, custom-made choppers. So we're going to talk maybe a little bit about some of those things that happened in that show through the different seasons as we talk about some of our top picks. The show had a renewal with American Chopper Senior versus Junior for an additional 4 seasons before it went off the air for a number of years. And one of the reasons why we're talking about this is because now, after a number of years off the air, the show is back again on Discovery Channel, and they're starting their 11th season. So they've had just 1 episode so far.
Yeah, it was kind of like they put it out as a teaser. They have 1 episode, and it's going to be another couple months before the rest of the season is shown.
So you can look forward to that. You might be able to catch that first episode somewhere on demand, or maybe even on the YouTubes somewhere. But it's a show that I grew up really, really enjoying. And as a biker myself, I was just really into a lot of the custom aspect of the choppers and what they were able to do with that.
Yeah, I'm not a biker, but I appreciate the art and the beauty of the bikes that they built. And it was interesting to see how, even with the chaos and the dysfunctional relationship of the family, they were still able to put out these amazing machines and get done the work they were done. Ultimately, it led to them splitting apart and becoming 2 separate companies. But they were still able to create some awesome things while they were working together.
The show definitely had its drama. It wasn't really my favorite part of the show. Some of it, though, was a little funny at times, especially when Mikey got involved, because he had a way of alleviating some of that tension.
Yes.
Just with his hijinks and stuff, and he was a nice addition to the show itself, and just that dynamic within the family. So, and Mikey wasn't really a builder. He swept up around the shop and did a number of other things, although he did get involved in a couple of builds.
True.
So I think maybe now we can just go right into talking about some of our top picks, which might lead us into just talking about other aspects of the show. So starting off at number 5, what was your number 5 pick?
My number 5 was when they came back and did the junior versus senior thing. There was a challenge in one of the episodes where Cadillac asked them to each shop to build a bike, and I went with Junior's Cadillac version.
Okay.
He was able to take the taillight from one of the cars and build that into the fender, so that you're looking at the fender and it is the back of the car with just a single taillight, and the rest of the body of the bike, just you looked at it and you knew it was that Cadillac.
Yeah,
car.
Absolutely.
So that's my number 5.
And I'm going to say this too. I'm going to give you my number 5. But what I did, I found this so difficult to try to reduce down to 5. And it's like I'm going to have to say 7 or 10 or 12. You know, I just can't do it. But what I did is I kind of categorized some of these bikes. You know, and I said, okay, well, there were like 4 different build offs, because even in season 4, there was an episode called Junior versus Caesar, and it was for their production model bikes. And Senior had his Green Machine, and Junior had his bike that was based on the Black Widow, but it was a production model of the Black Widow. So we really had 4 different kind of build-off events, even though the American public didn't get to vote on that first one. It was people at, I can't remember if it was Daytona Beach or wherever it was that they actually had that show and had people vote. But there were like, so I had build-offs as its one of its own, just a general category, and then I threw web-themed bikes in its own separate category, and then stuff like for the armed forces.
So what you're saying is you don't have a top 5.
I do have a top 5, and based on in each of these categories. So the first category I have is trikes. So there were a number of trikes that were built on the show, maybe not as much as the rest, but I wanted to get at least one trike in there, and for me it was Paul Jr.'s Gears of War trike. This trike is just mean from, tip to toe. And, you've got these big fat tires on there, front and rear. And, you've got these kind of like running boards almost, where you step on bars that are like cow catcher type things that you'd see on a train. That even the exhaust, Gatling gun exhaust that was facing forward, just everything about that, the rims. It looked like if those rims brushed against something, it would take a chunk right out of whatever it hit while it was in motion. And I just really liked the appearance and I'm going to say too that when I was doing my list, a lot of it was form over function. I normally am function over form. I want something that's going to perform well, that's going to do everything that I need it to do. That's first and foremost, and looks and aesthetics are a second place for me for that. But for this, I threw that other stuff out the window, and I just looked at the appearance of these bikes and the beauty and the craftsmanship that went into it. So that was my number 5 pick.
Okay.
Should I go to my number 4 then?
Yeah, let's go to your number 4.
All right, so number 4, that category for me, the category it wound up falling into was bikes that were these tribute type bikes, whether it was for the armed forces or it was for firemen, police, just military in general. There were a lot of different bikes that fell into this basic category. And what I wound up settling on, even though there's a lot of gorgeous bikes in there, and it was very hard for me to pick just one in that category, but I went with the Geico Armed Forces bike. The chrome itself, depending upon lighting and stuff, kind of had that appearance of white. The whole color scheme throughout it was red, white, and blue, or red, white, or red, chrome, and blue, and it was just a gorgeous bike in big block letterings of honor, valor, and it just throughout the whole bike in the 5-point stars for those rims, which were gold. It was one of the few things that was a little different. And each point of the star representing the various branches of the military. It to me is just a low, long, sleek bike, and just a very beautiful bike. I just love the way it looks.
I honestly don't remember that one specifically. No, you don't need to bring it up.
I'll show you. Yeah.
But it's I'm sure when I see the picture, I'll recognize it.
Okay, so
honestly, I don't specifically remember that one.
Look at those beefy.
I mean, I remember watching the show when it was on, and if it was on reruns, I'd watch it. But I obviously, you brought the DVDs with you. You're definitely a little more into it than I am. But
you noticed I didn't have all the seasons of that. I was telling Corey earlier. It's like, yeah, when they first came out, you could pick up a whole season for $19.99. And then once they got really popular, when season 4 was available, it was $29.99 for half a season. I was like, no.
Was it also on Blu-ray too? And that
not back then.
Okay,
there wasn't Blu-ray back then.
All right, so
your number 4 pick.
Yeah, so my list is just a straight top 5. I didn't break it down into categories. But my number 4 is the Anti-Venom.
Gorgeous bike.
Which was the first bike that Paul Jr. built out of his new shop.
Yes.
And it was kind of his his way to get back into it, because I believe when they split up, he had a 1 year where he couldn't do anything because he had a no compete clause.
Yeah.
So I think he did another web-based bike to get back to his roots, get back into the groove that he had built up. But I like it because it's a tribute to the Black Widow, which was the one he's probably most famous or most known for.
Yeah.
But it was different enough that it kind of proved that he could branch out on his own and do it without having his father behind him.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great bike. Great bike. So that was your...
that was my number 4.
Number 4 pick. So what's your number 3 pick?
My number 3 was the Statue of Liberty bike.
Love that bike.
It's got a lot of subtle cues to the statue. It's plated in chrome. That's the same chrome that they use when they repair the Statue of Liberty. Or not chrome, copper.
Yeah.
I meant, sorry.
They actually took copper from because when they're doing work on the Statue of Liberty, they sometimes actually will take copper out of it, take pieces, whole chunks and pieces out of it, and that leftover, that metal, they had some of that to be able to melt down and use in the plating process to copper plate a lot of that bike.
But it's just cool to see that coppery, chrome, shiny look, and with all the the air cover is the torch, and lots of subtle cues to point back to the statue.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. That bike was in my top 5 for a long time, and I couldn't settle. I could not settle on a top 5, and it wasn't until I kind of broke things up into categories that I was able to do that. And but that was right in there in the top for me. So it's one of my honorable mentions. I absolutely love that bike. It's a gorgeous bike. All right, so that was your number 3. So my number 3 is actually the Anti-Venom. So the Anti-Venom bike, as you were talking about, was Paul Jr.'s return. His first bike in the Senior versus Junior, American Chopper Senior versus Junior, for that 4-season run. And, I said earlier that the category for me was, one of the categories was web-themed bikes, because there was the Dream bike, which was the green web-themed bike that had the kind of ghosted tank. Again, not very functional. They had a very small tank hidden somewhere down below, but still was a cool kind of bike to me. It never won out over the Black Widow. The Black Widow was my favorite bike of all time, but the Anti-Venom knocked it out for me. When I heard he was doing another web bike, I was like, no, move on from that. You've already got the best web bike that could ever be made. And I really, really loved this. The color scheme of that, and you had the black with a little bit of red and a little bit of that yellow in it as well. It was really, really nice in the chrome. I love how he did the webs, and he did them differently on this. It wasn't just a wrap of webs over the tank. It was a cutout from the tank and the web filling in place of where those cutouts were. And just there was a number of things he did differently to make it a really unique bike. So that that to me is a winner in the top, in the top 5 for me.
Okay.
So my number 2 bike, this is actually probably going to surprise some people too, with all the beautiful bikes that are out there. And you probably noticed a theme that most of the bikes that I'm picking are Junior's bikes. I really like him as a builder, and I like more of the new school. I'm not into the old school look. I appreciate it, and I wouldn't turn down a chopper if it was given to me that was an old school chopper, but given the choice, I like the lower. I don't like a tank really high up. I'm not into ape hanger handlebars. I just I can appreciate those bikes, but my preference is for some of the new school style. There was a bike for the company Newmont Mining that this particular bike, in part because of the color scheme, just thoroughly enjoyed. It's basic main colors, and I actually don't really like gold as a color on cars and bikes and stuff, but this bike had that, and it was somewhat muted gold, and it had this royal blue color and a chrome as well. So the gold and chrome normally I wouldn't put together, but just the way this bike was set up and the whole aspect of the mining. This didn't have a lot of big things coming off of it. Like they had that one that was like a 57 Chevy where the whole front fairing, you had two headlights and you had a big back end trunk with taillights. And to me, it's a little hokey, a little cartoony, and this was just a nice chopper. Those rims look like you could take them off, mount them to a machine, and they'll cut stone.
It's another one that I'm not familiar with just by the name and looking at it. I don't recall it particularly, but I mean, yeah, it looks beautiful, and we'll have pictures up here of all the bikes as we're doing them. But yeah, it's another one that I'm not familiar with.
And it reminds me of you, so that's the other thing.
Okay.
Well, you remember the image you did of for class that was you as your face, but King Tut. It had those kind of colors in it. Those colors were in it, and I was like, "That's Corey."
And I'll find that graphic design class image of me as King Tut that I did, and I'll put that up there as well. So my number 2 is the Black Widow.
Okay.
So to me, that is the quintessential. When I think of OCC, that's the first bike I think of. It was the first time that Paul really went with the spider theme, the spider web theme, and really decked out everything. You're going to prove me wrong, but in my head, that's what I remember.
For the show itself, yes. For as far as builds on the show go, yes. Because technically they did, with just a paint job, a Spider-Man bike. That's not the same thing. You're right.
And it's also the first build that Paul did with Vinny, who's one of my favorite secondary characters on the show. Vincent DiMartino, was a friend of Paul's that was a mechanic, and he worked in the shop. And I don't know if he's still working with Paulie. I know when they first did the junior versus senior, Vinny was on there working with Paulie. I don't know if he still does. I didn't. He wasn't on the new episode.
Yeah, but we also didn't really see much going on.
Correct.
Build with Junior yet. He's got a project that he's getting ready to start. So
it remains to be seen if he's still working with him or not. I'm hoping he is, so he'll be on the show.
He was kind of towards the end of the senior versus junior. He was on there less and less. I think he left, and he did start his own shop. He started his own shop before joining Paulie, and I don't know if he went back to that again.
So it remains to be seen. But again, it's to me, when I think of the show, that is one of the 2 bikes. Obviously, it's my number 2. So there's one that I think of, even higher than that. But to me, that is quintessential OCC and Paul Jr.
Yes. Well, that was a tough one for me to push out, and again, only because I had done it by category. If I didn't do this category thing, I never would have settled on a top 5 for one. But it would have been there in the top. It just I like that Entom Venom just a little bit more, but it is absolutely 100% an honorable mention for me, and it hurts me to say that, an honorable mention, because it is the start of the show for me, even though they had a pilot episode that's not a part of season 1 where they had the jet bike, and that's the first thing that came out, I think, in 2002 in December. And then the show kicked off in 2003 with what was the bike you just said?
Black Widow.
Black Widow, sorry.
He's old.
I was going to say Spider-Man. I was like, it's not the Spider-Man bike. Everybody called it that for so long.
Right.
It's the Spider-Man bike. And it's like, no, it's not. It's the Black Widow. Now we get down to number 1. I know we're going to have 2 different number 1s, most likely. So
yeah, I'll let you go last since OCC is your thing. He's wearing the shirt. My number 1 is the Fire Bike.
Love that bike.
I really appreciate the fact that it's a complete tribute to the firefighters that passed away on 9/11. It really hit me emotionally when I saw that the 2 episodes where they did it, I grew up as a firehouse brat. My father was a volunteer fire chief, and it really meant a lot to me for them to do that bike in tribute of the firefighters.
I have to agree. It's a gorgeous bike. There was a lot of craftsmanship. There was a lot of heart. There was a lot of just blood, sweat, and tears that went into that bike, and it had pained me not to have that in my top 5. It is my honorable mentions. It absolutely would be part of a top 10. This list may look a little different too if we were doing a top 10 as far as the order goes, but again, just the way I done it is the only way I could get to a top 5. But that is absolutely an honorable mention. Beautiful bike, and I love what it represented. And it actually had right on the very top of the tank was an actual rivet
from the Trade Center, yes.
From the World Trade Center. Yep. So everything about that is amazing, you know. So going to my number one pick. My number one pick was within the category of the biker build-offs, and as I mentioned, there had been 4 of them over the various seasons and that they've had. And in 2012, the biker build-off juniors bike, again, you're noticing a theme: junior, junior, junior. This one, he had one in another episode, which is an honorable mention for me, where it was themed after like a World War II plane. You know, it had a lot of rivets, and there was chrome and copper, which, again, another interesting color combination I wouldn't put together, but I'm going on too long talking about an honorable mention. But this one was based on like an old 40s or 50s style car, more 40s. And you had matte black as a color. You had red and white pinstriping. There was an ornament on the front fender, and none of this looked gaudy. The grill work that was done at the front of the bike before the front wheel, just everything. The red spoked wheels.
What was the name of the bike?
It's 2012 Biker Build-Off Junior's bike. I don't know if it had a name or not. They had V8 on there, and you know, it had Junior's logo on that front grille with the wings. I don't know if it actually had its own name, and they don't give it a name, if you will, when you're looking at it.
Like you'll notice that as you're watching,
you'll see pictures. Maybe we'll get some various pictures on there, so you can see some of these highlights that I'm talking about. The fender tips on there looking like bumpers, the that cream-colored leather seat, and even the handlebars, where part of it looks like a little bit like a steering wheel, and again, it has that leather wrap, that rich Corinthian leather. So I don't really know if it's Corinthian or not, but the pipe's coming down where it looks like 4 into 1, and it looks like the header, you know, for a V8 engine. Just everything about this, and in big red and white lettering on a black background, New York. You know, everything about this bike, I just love it. It's long, it's low, it's mean, it's beefy. It's my top pick.
Yeah, and again, I mean, you're more well versed on the show. It's one that I, looking at it, I'm like, yeah, I kind of remember it, but I don't specifically remember it to recall it.
So I think for you, there was a lot more of the emotional impact of what the build.
Yeah, I mean that's
maybe drove your picks.
I mean, I watched it casually. I wasn't, into it. I obviously as much as you, as far as knowing the specifics of the bike. So I basically just went off my top 5, and I didn't even create an honorable mention. I mean, I thought of my top 5 and then did research on the bikes a little bit. But it's ones that, as someone was a casual observer of the show, these are the bikes that I remember the most.
Oh, sure.
That's where my list came from. These are the ones that when I just sat down and thought about it without opening up a browser window and Googling anything, these are the ones that I remember and liked.
Yeah, and I think if I led a little bit more with my heart, I might have had different choices too, including things like, the fireman bike, and just other tribute bikes. But now we're going to get to the point where we're talking about some honorable mentions. Were there any other bikes that you thought of?
As I said, I just came up with the top 5. I mean, I remember some other ones. You know, the jet bikes was cool. The B-52 bomber bike was pretty cool. I remember they did one for Sunoco that had that blue and gold paint job. There was another Geico bike too that had more of the lizard skin paint job on it. That one sticks out in my head.
Got that right there. As an honorable mention.
But yeah, I mean, I didn't do deep research into every single bike that they build. I was just going by from my memory. What are the ones that stuck out to me?
Just so you know, let's. Darn you. Okay, see, that goes on and on. It's very tight. He's 4 pages long.
He's got a Microsoft Word document listing every single bike and what episode and.
Yeah, it's 3.5 pages long at 10-point font, so it's a long list of episodes.
He's a geek for this stuff.
A little bit. But some of my other honorable mentions that I'll say is the David Mann bike. Now
that one I'm familiar with.
That's an old school bike, and I really appreciate it for what it represented because David Mann was an artist who did artwork for Easy Rider magazine. Yeah. Amazing, really cool type artwork. And they were building a bike for him that wound up being a tribute bike because during the recording of the show and the build of the bike, he passed away. And so they wound up, doing some fundraising stuff with some of the artwork that was created for that bike, for that, that show and everything. And the thing that was unique about that, and even though, like I said, it's an old school chopper, and that's not where I go with it, is they brought in, now Nubs is an artist that they have gone to in the past, and there's another, actually a painter is that they've gone to do their tins and tanks and all that. But they brought in another painter. I don't remember her name, but she did some very interesting work with the paint job where there was a base coat of paint and then she etched into the paint and then painted into the etching to do this really unique depth flame that truly had depth because it was being scored into the paint and tank itself. I really loved what she was able to do with that. Just the paint job alone gives that an honorable mention, plus what it represented. One of my favorite quotes from Paul Tunnell Sr. is, what was, and what is, and what is what's happening right now. So I just had to get that out too. Cranky Ape, I'm not going to talk too much detail. We'll have some images up there. As far as bobbers go, Billy Joel. So that's an older school look, which is different than your typical chopper that's raised up long rake, tank in your face. It's a little bit lower, almost not really cafe racer, but it's kind of stripped down. It's got the Springer front end on it. And I was on that episode when they were giving him the chopper. I was there at the Syracuse Carrier Dome. I was in the 16th row center. Thanks, Joe, for the tickets. Dana and I really enjoyed the show and enjoyed being part of that experience as well. But they panned the camera in the audience, and I'm wearing a bright red shirt, and it was blurry, but it's like, there's me. So that's not the reason why I like the bike. I like the bike just because it's a cool bobber, and I'm in the market for a bobber. So if somebody's got one, very reasonably priced, like a few bucks, I would love to buy it. So $2, and Silver State choppers, Roadlock, Cubex. There's just so many. iRobot. The front fender on that looked like batlith. So now I'm getting out my Star Trek geeky side, and I just like that weaponized look for that front fender in the iRobot bike. Plus Will Smith, right? He keeps coming up. So does George Clooney. I forgot to mention him last time because we talked about 2 different actors that were in a movie,
and George Clooney was
the third one,
third actor in the trio.
So there you go, George. You got your shout out. All right. I think that's gonna wrap it up for me on my honorable mentions. I could go on.
Yeah. We definitely took different approaches with this one. Yeah. You dove right in and could probably name every single bike that they built on the show. Or pretty darn close.
I could get there.
Or if I gave you the
there.
name of the show, the bike, you could probably tell me what season and what the bike was about.
Probably not the season, and but I
But-
can tell you about the build a little bit.
You know-
Actually, less about that Sunoco bike. I totally forgot about that. So you mentioned that one. I was like, oh yeah, there was a Sunoco bike. But I remember the Snap-on bike. They call it the tool bike.
But anyways, yeah, and mine was more of as a non-biker, and just looking at it from the art aspect, how it emotionally made me feel with seeing the different bikes. But that was definitely a different top 5 than what we've done before. But yeah, we're gonna do another episode 2, so look for another one coming out where we went and saw Ready Player One, new movie that came out this week. So we're gonna do a review of that, and so look for that coming out. I don't know if it'll come out the same day or a couple days later, but it'll be out soon.
All right.
All right, so I'm Corey,
I'm Tommy.
and we'll see you next time.